Okay, hi everybody. My name is Peter Parnes, as you heard, and I'm going to give you a talk on generative AI for learning, opportunities and challenges. And thank you for having me here today. Let's dive straight into the talk. So today I'm going to talk about how AI tools can help us with learning. I'm going to start by talking about sort of generative AI, some examples, etc. For those that are familiar with this area, you've probably seen many of these, but I guess we have a bit of a diverse audience here today. Talk a bit about the challenges. I will show you a number of applications, examples, talk about limitations, spend some time on the cheating question, because it's hard to talk about this subject without talking about cheating. And then looking a bit forward, implications in society, implications on learning with AI, what opportunities do we see? And then afterwards, we'll have some time for questions and discussions as well. A little bit of everything to hopefully inspire you. So generative AI, that is the sort of sub area of artificial intelligence where we look at AI creating new things. So the AI field itself has been around since the 1950s, when have had sort of different approaches, different goals over the years, changing a bit. But this talk will mainly be on sort of looking at AI tools that sort of generate things. And I'll come back to that several times during this talk. So generative AI is using AI to create new things, as I just said. And that can be text, as we've seen exemplified through ChatGPT, but it can also be computer code, sounds, music, animation, graphics, computer games, etc. Anything where sort of it can, based on an input, generate an output for us. So here on the right, you have just a few examples, and I'll show you a number of more examples, some just creative images at the top, some ChatGPT text, and then what looks like perhaps a photo of me, but it's not. It's actually an AI-generated image of me. I'll come back to that later on. So just for those that might not have tested ChatGPT, ChatGPT is a conversational AI tool where it's sort of passive and answers questions for us. And initially it was text only, like we can see here. Explain generative AI, I get an explanation back, and then I can follow up with the new question, explain it to a 7-year-old child. And something you'll notice in the second question is that I didn't give it sort of, I didn't have to repeat the question or the context of generative AI. And the AI engine, ChatGPT here, took that from the context of this conversation. You also see that I get sort of a bit of a different answer when I ask it to explain it for a 7-year-old child. And I think that's one of the sort of key uses when it comes to using ChatGPT for learning, that I can get different types of explanations. So right now, as I mentioned, we have ChatGPT. It's a tool from OpenAI, a company founded in 2015 with the goal to provide open AI tools for everybody. They soon realized that they needed a lot of funding to do this, so they sort of more switched over to charging for services. They've released a number of AI models to do text generation, but also programming, image generation, etc. The open version of ChatGPT is based on an AI brain called GPT 3.5. And as I understand, for the versioning number, it wasn't the first one. There were previous versions of this AI brain, GPT brain, that could generate text. But it wasn't until ChatGPT was released in the end of November last year where it actually became really useful there. I can also mention that ChatGPT became the world's fastest growing internet service ever there. So they reached about 1 million active users in less than 4 days. Then they, after a bit later, released also GPT-4, which is sort of the next version of this AI brain, which is much more useful, is much more powerful, but it costs money to use it. Then we have Google. They also have their own corresponding chat engine called Bard. It's open for everybody to use worldwide. One of their models there is Palm ML, and a coming one is Gemini. Then we have Anthropic, which is another company that have Claude. You have U.com. You have Perplexity, which is basically front end to several different AI engines. And then we have a number of other efforts. For instance, Meta, Facebook, that is. They have released a lot of sort of open models. They instead of releasing sort of chatbots, they just release the underlying AI models for anybody to use for their own applications. Then we have X.AI, announced by Elon Musk. That's supposed to be sort of a non-restricted AI engine. I'll come back to sort of this bit restrictions a bit later. And there's many others like Mistral and others, and there's new ones popping up all the time. So what can then these chatbots and specifically ChatGPT do? Well, one of the main key things here is helps students understand. And that is something that when I discuss with my students on how they use ChatGPT, this one actually pops up several times or quite often. And that is they have studied something, they think they've understood it correctly, a concept or an algorithm or whatever, and then they ask ChatGPT to explain it to them, not to cheat, not to sort of get help, but just to get a confirmation that, well, yes, their mental model of this answer is the same as these AI models there. And then if they didn't match, it becomes sort of a learning process there. They have to think about, well, did I misunderstand something here, or is actually is ChatGPT lying to me, hallucinating? You get very quick answers, which is quite useful. I use it myself for basically anything. I have to admit that in many cases, I've replaced Google searches with using AI chatbots like ChatGPT. Another thing that comes up from students and myself is getting started with tasks. I think many of you have been sort of a bit sort of frustrated with you're supposed to write a report, something, you should get started, but you don't really know where to start. And here you can use these chatbots then to give you sort of a suggestion. Well, you could structure your paper in this way, or here are 5 bullets to sort of dive into, and you can then select what you want to start with. Get the inspiration, etc. there. Most specifically, as I said, answer questions, discuss questions, write texts. I think this is one that has come up quite a lot, especially when we talk about cheating, where we have AI engines sort of generating text for us. But perhaps more importantly is summarize texts. We have large amounts of text, and we can have AI then summarize it for us and give it sort of a short version of it. And we can also do that in different languages. So many of these AI models, they've sort of learned language through reading a large amounts of text, or learning from a lot of text, and by that sort of also gaining language, human language and knowledge there. And there's a number of other things we can do with these chatbots. And just to give you an example of also that beneath then ChatGPT, there's also the model itself, GPT, which can be accessed through other services. And this is just one of the many different examples that pop up there. And the Gamma.app, it's a service for creating, among other things, presentations. So you just give it sort of a headline. In this case here, I apologize for these slides being in Swedish, I just realized that now. But here the title is, I gave it the title of sort of Generative AI and Learning. It asked me a bit about sort of style, a bit about the length, etc. And then it just generated 10 slides for me with these sort of images, a lot of text in there. And for me, I would say that this is sort of 85–90% done. I could then go in and edit it, add some details, remove some text, etc. But it's a really good way, an easy way of sort of getting started with a presentation. And this is just one of very many applications in this field. And then we can use it to create new images. These are just some examples. These are actually getting quite old. I made this like almost now 6 months ago. Here at the top is more generic images, and then at the bottom is a number of images of me. These are created using a AI model, so these are not photos. These are just models, AI model generated photos or pictures, where I took 20 selfies of myself, trained an AI engine to do this using a tool called Stable Diffusion. And then I get sort of a sub-brain that I could put into a bigger trained model and put myself into various contexts, various layouts, etc. And then on the bottom right, just to explain why there's two of me there, that is just sort of the AI engine getting a bit confused, where I asked it to do a sort of a widescreen photo. It didn't really know what to fill it with, so it actually put in a second one of me in there. Not very useful, but or useful for this example. Then we have commercial services that can help us create new things. Midjourney is such a service where we can access it. They just released a mobile application a couple of days ago, so you can download that and access their service through like a mobile app as well. Then last week, ChatGPT released an integrated, or the next version of their image generation tool, DALL-E 3. As you can understand, there was 1 and 2 before that. And DALL-E 2 was released actually several years ago. And now it was time to the sort of next generation. But the difference here is that to use many of these image tools, you have to give them very, very detailed prompts. You have to very specifically describe what you wanted in the image. But what OpenAI have done here is to connect it to ChatGPT. So if I write sort of, give me a donut in Lego style, for instance, one of these images here, then actually ChatGPT will take my short request and then pad that out with sort of a lot of more details and give those details to DALL-E that then generates the photo. So it's a sort of mixing several AI models together. I'll come back to this a bit later. Then we can also do programming. Once again, OpenAI, they have a specific trained model to help with programming. It's called Codex, and it's part of GitHub. It's called GitHub Copilot, where we as programmers can get help. We get live examples, etc., to add to our code. But what it cannot do is explain code. But ChatGPT can do that. ChatGPT might not be as good as generating code, but the advantage here is that I can ask questions about the code. In this case here, these are several steps in creating the game Snake. So I get code, I ask questions, I ask it to add things, and also something that typically a programming help AI wouldn't do is that here ChatGPT also gives me instructions on how to use this code inside of the game development tool Unity, because in that tool you also have to sort of select things in menus. You have to add extra work that is not the classical programming. So in the right image here you see number 4 bullets at the top there, where sort of you have to do this as well. So, and here I also can upload my own code and interact with that and ask questions. So for programming students or people learning programming, I think this is a great opportunity to sort of interact and get help with your programming learning. Then we can interact with documents. This is another example, Chat PDF, upload a PDF file. You get a very short summary. You get suggestions on questions to ask on this paper, and then you can go in and sort of ask questions, etc. But also compared to ChatGPT, here you also get references back to the paper you uploaded. So you get sort of, as you can see it at the bottom right here, it's 1s and 2s, where it sort of points back into the paper itself there. So, or it could be any document, and you'll get sort of pointers back. Another example, OpenUni.ai. how can we consume lectures in new ways? Here, I give it a link to a lecture. The tool will then extract the audio track, transcribe that using OpenAI's Whisper service, which is a specific AI model for translating speech into text. And then it takes the text, sends to GPT, and I can then interact with the text. Sort of, what is, give me a summary of this lecture. I don't understand what the teacher is talking about here and here about that. But as you can see on the right, you probably can't understand what's there because it's actually written in Polish. And that is to show you another great opportunity here, and that is that we can interact with these chat engines in various languages. And that is really important from an inclusion perspective, because we have a lot of students that have non-Swedish or non-English background, and if they don't understand as much, then obviously their learning will suffer from that. And here they can sort of have a lecture in Swedish, but then ask questions in basically any language they want to. So what makes GPT so special compared to many of the sort of previous efforts into doing this? Well, first of all, it's trained on very large amounts of data, nothing new really there. OpenAI, they say that they selected sources with care and washed the data. And then there was sort of classical machine learning as part of this. It's sort of the machines learn by themselves. But the twist here is that the machines do not learn all by themselves, but rather here OpenAI employed people that first would write questions to it to sort of show the AI model sort of what is a good question, and then also write answers to show what's a good answer, and then rank answers afterwards. So the model would then generate answers and get back. And then we create, or they created, a separate AI model that could then sort of rank the answers and give feedback to the bigger trained GPT brain. And by that, you get something that responds in a way that is more attractive to us humans. And then following this training, you also do so-called alignments or adjustments after the machine training, where you sort of give it continuous feedback. And you can see this as sort of raising a child. A child learns something, and then you give it positive feedback, you give it negative feedback to sort of push and demote certain attributes of their life or the AI model. A challenge with these chat engines and this transformer-based technology is that it's very helpful. It wants to answer, and technically, what it's really important to point out here is that these chat engines, all the sort of GPT-based ones, they are just statistical models of trying to guess the next part of a word based on the context. Sort of, it looks a few words forward, and then looking at the context so far, and then based on this huge trained model. And it sort of just guesses. And then from that guess, we get very good text back. But it also means that the model itself sometimes can be over helpful. Like in this example, how do you grow horse eggs? This is something that ChatGPT happily answered in January, but doesn't today. So, cheating. Can students cheat using AI tools? Well, the short answer is yes. All information submitted in writing can be cheated on. Essays, quizzes, programming, and more there. But it really comes down then to sort of what is cheating? In the end, or the bottom line here, is that we want the students to learn as much as possible. So how can we encourage them to do that? Well, when it comes to cheating, they shouldn't do sort of misleading examination. They shouldn't claim that they know something when they don't. But what if we ask them to use AI tools? Well, then it comes back to sort of independent work and how much can they use these AI tools there. And then let me just jump forward to this, and I'll come back to the other slides I skipped. Allowing AI tools. So some universities in the US, they were very, very quick on setting rules on using AI tools. This was back in, I think, February this year. And they said, well, students can use AI tools up to 25%. But what does that mean? And for me, using these AI tools doesn't mean that I sort of generate the text, copy paste it in, and I'm done. But rather, I use the AI tool as a sort of co-author, in the sense that I can ask it questions, it helps me give suggestions. I ask ChatGPT something, I get an answer, I write a bit, I ask more about one part, write some more, ask ChatGPT to improve my text perhaps, have it translate my text. And in that case, we don't really know what the percentage is. And then also going forward, we'll have to see what happens when we have these AI tools available everywhere. These will be included in every basic writing tool we have, like Office, Google Docs, etc. They will just be there and help us independently if we want it or not. They will be just available to us. So it'd be sort of hard to say, when do we actually use an AI tool and when aren't we using it? So coming back then to detecting cheating, so we have our classical plagiarism checks, original and others. They don't work because the text generated is typically unique. Then we can say, well, everything generated by an AI needs to have some kind of watermark. That is something that claims and shows that this is generated by an AI. For text, this is really hard because, I mean, it would be just text there, and if you wanted to cheat, you would just easily remove that. For images and music and others, it could be a bit trickier, but it's no way you can sort of enforce this. So with the right tools, you can remove any kind of watermarking in there, as long as you know how it's done. And then the third one is then, can we use AI to detect this cheating? Well, the short answer there is, once again, no, we can't. Research show that these tools, the AI detection tools, don't work. OpenAI themselves, they released a tool for this earlier this year, but then after a few months, they removed it because they say, well, it doesn't work, and they haven't done. And then we have a number of commercial entities that claim that they have tools that work. I continuously test these as soon as they release new versions, and yeah, to me, they do not. Then we have researchers that have tested many different tools systematically, and they also conclude that these AI detection tools do not work, and especially if we have more formal language. The only time it actually does work is if we can build up some kind of model of the students' earlier work. So if I provide a number of reports of this sort of students' work, and then I sort of can compare, and I can see that it's different. But it really comes back to, how do we do examination? And I keep saying that this is a sort of a bit of a democratization of cheating. Anybody can cheat using these tools, though. But students have been able to cheat for a very, very long time, but it's been sort of uneven. Some have had help at home, some friends, copy pasting sort of solutions, etc. And it can also be that we teachers have been a bit lazy, where we give homework, we get the students to write reports, and then we just look very briefly in the reports. Well, yeah, it's what we're looking for is there. But instead, we perhaps should look at the whole process here, and then also perhaps combining different examination methods. So we can still have home exams, for instance, write a report, but we connect that with some, say, verbal interview afterwards. So I sit down 5 minutes with each student and ask them, explain this work to me, and I ask them some follow-up questions. And there I probably quite quickly can assess, do they actually understand what they've written in their report? And that can be very time consuming. So what if we then use AI to do that extra examination for us? I've done some experiments with this, several tests. Once again, apologize for this being in Swedish, but here is just a simple prompt to ChatGPT to ask me about if I know AI and learning. And I've done this several times, being sort of the more sort of elusive student that doesn't really faking that I don't really know the subject, going back and forth between questions, etc. I have many more images on this, so I can show you afterwards if you're interested. But in the end, I actually get a grade on this. So in this case here, a grade 4 on a scale to 5, and also a short assessment of my knowledge, including what it wants me to study more and how I should improve myself. And this should be seen as an experiment, nothing we sort of can really use today, but I think this has a really potential of helping us, but also giving feedback to this student in new ways. If we then look a bit sort of forward, or actually backwards, let's start with a bit backwards here. So AI is better than humans in many different areas, and here are just 5 examples here. Handwriting recognition, speech recognition, image recognition, reading comprehension, language comprehension, etc. And then in the figure here on the right, on the x-axis, you can say we have, that's years starting in around 1998. And then on the y-axis, we have the sort of the tested performance of this AI model, where -100 is that it doesn't know anything, 0 is sort of the benchmark of humans doing the same tests, and then everything above 0 is better than the average human. And here we can see that in all these cases, they end up in the end being better than humans. And we can also see that the things that we started doing at the end of the 90s took quite some time to reach that level. For instance, handwriting recognition took very long time, or speech recognition. I don't know if people used speech recognition tools about 20 years ago. They were, I mean, they didn't work very well. Like Dragon Dictate and others, you had to spend several hours training them on your voice, etc. But today it's basically perfect. I mean, it's 99% done. You get perfect transcriptions of audio. But you can also see that the speed of how we, the sort of humanity, solve these various problems increases. So language understanding only took sort of, depending, of course, of how you define when we started looking at it, but it took just a few years, and it's better than humans. And then if we then look forward and look a bit on sort of what we do not have today, I see a bug in my slides here. Emotional intelligence and the others should be on the same level here, that those are not subtitles or subheadings there. So for instance, emotional intelligence is one of those areas where AI does not perform very well today. Problem solving and decision making, it might seem that these sort of chat engines, the text-based ones, are really good at that, but they can obviously be better. Then we have the whole question of personalization. How can these tools become more personal? Today, the AI models are very generic. They've learned a lot, but how can we make them sort of use my own data? Like I showed, for instance, in generating photos of myself. Creativity, this whole field of combining AI models. We take many different AI models and combine them together. And also something that's come up quite recently is where we can interact it with these chat and text engines using not only text, but also, for instance, images. And both ChatGPT and Bard and some of the others have this today. And as I said, I already talked about combining chat, sort of different AI models, and you saw the results earlier, so I'll skip this for now. And here are just some other examples of DALL-E generating text or images from text prompts. And the text prompts in this case here was actually the invitation to today's lecture. So I just gave it the copy paste from the Taiga webpage. And I got these 4 images where it sort of interprets the text, generates a prompt for DALL-E for me, and then generates these quite diverse images. But the other side of this, when we talk about images, and that is also image analysis or image vision, where we can upload images to these engines and have them analyze them for me. So here are just 4 examples. On the left, we have 2 from ChatGPT, and on the right, it's Bard, Google Bard. And I'm quite impressed with sort of the detail you get in these answers. And then you obviously can continue discussing this and ask questions about these photos. So how can students use this? Obviously, they can upload things, but one of the big things here is perhaps getting help with math. These are just two examples of solving math problems. One a bit more basic on the left, and then on the right, it's matrices where you can go in. Once again, this isn't anything new. There have been tools that have been able to solve this problem and give the students solutions for many years. For instance, both from Alpha. But the thing here is the sort of accessibility, that it's much simpler and you get access to this. Just take a photo, upload it, and you get the answer. Once again, I have to point out sort of that the line between cheating and helping here is a sort of very, very thin line. Then Google also have a number of tools in this area, as I mentioned before. They have taken a bit other approach where they sort of integrate this with Google Apps or Google Workspace. They just announced yesterday or 2 days ago a new machine learning service called Notebook ML to interact with documents, ask questions about documents, etc. And they're also releasing new AI models to do this. Microsoft is also integrating AI into basically every tool. And for those that doesn't know it, Microsoft owns 49% of OpenAI today. Then we can integrate this in various other ways. For instance, this is one of my visions of helping students learn, AI assistance, where I have like an AI model that do not only give or does not give me the answer, I would say, but rather ask me sort of questions back in a Socratic learning way. So I can get them feedback on my questions. Again, they sort of ask me and it sort of becomes learning. And this is my vision for something that we should have in all our universities in the future, something that's sort of trained on our own course material, where the students then can interact with the course material as a complement to interacting with the teacher. Then to conclude, long term, we might see then a number of implications on the educational system. And as I just said, we have this sort of adaptive learning systems or individualized learnings with AI assistance. But we can take that to that perhaps we leave programs, we leave courses behind us, and these AI systems will then sort of create learnings paths that are just targeted just for me, where we have smart content that's created for me when I'm learning a specific thing. And for instance, when a friend learns the same thing, they might get a different type of content, but it's sort of created based on my my earlier learning. So the AI system would then learn from my earlier learnings and give me sort of learning assignments, present the materials in a way that is sort of attractive to me. This is nothing that exists today, so this is just a vision for the future. But the thinking here is that we can then have we free up the teachers for sort of the more deeper discussions. Then how is the education then affected by AI? Well, AI will replace many professions. I myself, I teach on civilingenjör, and that is a work market preparatory education where we should prepare our students for a future work market. But how should we prepare them when we don't even know what the work market will look like in 5 years or 10 years? In some areas, it will have changed a lot. Some researchers also claim that students will learn faster using AI tools. So what if we then have different time spans here, that some students go through programs quicker, others slower? And how can these tools help the learners learn more deeply? Sort of deep learning is really important here, so they actually remember something. But on the other side, how do we motivate to learning if everybody have these AIs that can then answer questions at lightning speed? I get an answer, I get a solution. I mean, it solves it for me. This technical problem, I get programs, it generate reports for me. So how do we actually motivate students and children to learn? Then we have, hallucination problems, and also finally access to these AI services. So that's a bit of a challenge here, because we have legal constraints, but also financial constraints. So some of these tools are free to use, but the better tools, for instance, everything I showed by image analysis, etc., students have to pay for it. And who pays for that? Students, universities. I did just a simple calculation yesterday for Luleå University of Technology. If I would, or if we would pay for ChatGPT Plus to all our students, then that would be about 46 million SEK per year, looking at the standard price there. So to summarize and shortly open up for some questions here, generative AI can be used to help us learn faster. I strongly believe that it will do that in the future. We'll see many new applications based on AI. For now, they typically separate AI tools, but they will then be integrated in the typical learning tools that we use in the learning management systems, document writing tools, etc. We're just getting started. This will go even faster in the future. And the big question for me is what will education look like in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And how do we as teachers adapt to that situation? And in a world with AI, what should we teach? I think that is one of the final questions for this. You find this presentation on my blog, pornos.com/blog, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And here you have my email address if you have questions after this talk as well. Thank you very much for listening. And now we'll open up for questions.